डियर स्टूडेंट्स अस्सलाम वालेकुम। हमने असल में कोड सॉरी लीनियर इक्वेशन टू वेरिएबल्स का ग्राफ सीखना है, और ग्राफ सीखने के लिए हमने कोऑर्डिनेट ज्योमेट्री पे आना है पहले। तो कोऑर्डिनेट ज्योमेट्री क्या है? हाउ ए पॉइंट कैन बी रिप्रेजेंटेड इन अ प्लेन with the help of two coordinates, and that is the geometrical representation of a point in a plane with the help of coordinates, and that geometrical representation we call the by the coordinates, with the help of coordinates or with the help of the axes two lines, one a horizontal and a vertical line, we call as a coordinate geometry. Now in order to understand the concept of coordinate geometry, we had to come to a new system of geometry. We call it as a Cartesian system, after the name of the famous French mathematician René Descartes. So let's try to understand the Cartesian system. इससे पहले हमने नंबर सिस्टम पढ़ा है, और नंबर सिस्टम में हमने नंबर लाइन पढ़ा है. नंबर लाइन यू नो is a line on which the numbers can be represented in such a way that we have a reference point and we fix a point over here, and the distances from this point are marked in equal units positively on one side and negatively on the other side. That is, we can mark the pointers from this reference point. This we call as the origin. So it is the origin, and the pointers are marked over here, equidistant pointers on the one side, on the right hand side, and others such as we mark them as 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 and so on. Similarly, we can mark the equidistant pointers on the negative side, negatively on the other side, that is on the left hand side, and mark them as negative numbers as -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6 and -7 and so on. Now what we have to do, what is the concept? René Descartes invented the idea of placing two such lines perpendicular to each other on a plane and locating points on the plane by referring them to these lines. So if another line is drawn perpendicular to this line, meeting or intersecting this line at this origin, then the lines can look like this. If you have two perpendicular lines, number line in such a way that they will meet or intersect at the origins, that is at this point, and you have pointers on two and distances like this. We can mark equidistant pointers negatively and positively on both the lines. Now in this case, this line we call is, in the horizontal line we name it as x prime, that means x axis, and the vertical line, this vertical line, we call it as y axis. So it has positive distance the upward direction, that is 1 2 3 4 are the positive points on it, and the downward direction it has negative distances 4 minus 5. So in this way these are two lines, one a horizontal line and the other is a vertical line. This horizontal line we call it as x-axis, and this vertical line is called the y-axis. So these two lines, that is one x-axis and y-axis, divide the plane into four parts, and each part is called a quadrant. So it is a quadrant. We have four quadrants. First quadrant, this will be called the second quadrant, and this we called as third quadrant, and this is called the fourth quadrant. So the x-axis and y-axis divide the plane into into four parts, and each part is called the quadrant. First quadrant, second quadrant, third quadrant, fourth. Now we call the, and this plane is called the Cartesian plane. Or coordinate plane. The plane is called coordinate plane or Cartesian plane. And the axis, or we call it as xy plane, and the axes are called coordinate axis. So these axes are called coordinate axis together, coordinate axis. Plural of axis is axis. So we call them as coordinate axis, and the plane is called coordinate plane or Cartesian plane after the name of the Descartes, the famous French mathematician, and or we call it as xy plane. And now any point in this xy plane, now it is all about the coordinate plane. So what a coordinate plane is, if you draw two perpendicular lines intersecting at the origin, the lines intersect at a point called origin, and the plane we call is xy plane or Cartesian plane. The plane gets divided into four parts by the two coordinate axes. Each part of the plane is called a quadrant. So in this way we have four quadrants that in the xy plane. One is, this is, we name them in the anti-clockwise direction as first quadrant, second quadrant, third quadrant, fourth. Now we will specify the position of a point in this xy plane with the help of two perpendicular distances, that is from the vertical axis and the distance from the horizontal axis. We call these two distances at the coordinates. So now let's look how can we specify the position of a point in a plane. If you have a coordinate plane, now you understand the concept of coordinate plane. We have two perpendicular lines, mutually perpendicular lines intersecting at a point. We call the point as origin. So we have now a horizontal line called x-axis. We mark it as x prime, and vertical line called y-axis as y prime. Now if you have a point over here in this plane, in this xy plane, or we call it as coordinate plane. So this point P is at a distance. If you draw two perpendiculars From P we draw perpendicular on the y-axis like this, and from the same point you draw perpendicular on the x-axis. Now the distance, let's say if the distance, what distance of a point P from x-axis, from this y-axis will be measured in the positive x, that is in the x direction, in the positive x direction, that is point P is at a distance of, if you know it, up to, if this is the distance of point P is x, so let me write down x is the distance of point P from the y-axis like this, and this is the distance of the point P from the x-axis. So distance of a point P from this is now x, because it is parallel to this distance. The distance of a point P from the y-axis is x, we called as x, it as x coordinate, and distance of the point P from from x-axis, so it will be measured in the y direction, in the vertical direction, so it is now y. So y is the distance of this point P from x-axis. So we have two perpendicular distances to specify the position of a point. The point P is at distance of x from the y-axis, and it is the distance of y from the x-axis. Now what, so we have a point P has two coordinates in the xy plane, that is x comma y. What is this x coordinate? Is a distance of point P from x from y axis. And what is this? This is the distance of point P from x axis. So the position of the point P can be specified by two coordinates. One we called as x coordinate. X coordinate is nothing but the perpendicular distance of the point P from y axis. Distance, or we call it as perpendicular distance of point P, or perpendicular distance of point P from y axis. So it is the distance of point P from y axis, we call it as x coordinate, and y coordinate is the distance of point P from x axis, perpendicular distance of P from x axis. So this is whole about the, we call them as coordinates. We have a point has two coordinates in xy plane, one is x and y. So in order to locate a point in xy plane, we had to find its two coordinates, that is how much it is at how much distant is the point from the y-axis, and how much distant it is from the x-axis. So this is the whole about the coordinate system and the coordinates of a point.